You are trading your life for money right now, and the exchange rate is a lie. I spent 47 years as a private duty nurse caring for some of the wealthiest people in America in their final months and years. I lived in their mansions. I ate at their tables. I held their hands at 3 in the morning when nobody else would come. I watched 87 of them die. And I am here to tell you that most of them were miserable. Not uncomfortable, not worried, miserable, profoundly, desperately unhappy in ways that their money could not touch. I need you to understand something before we go any further. I am not going to tell you money does not matter. That would be foolish. Money matters. I grew up during the Depression. My father lost his job in 1931, and we ate large sandwiches for 2 years. I know what poverty feels like. I know the terror of not being able to pay rent, not being able to see a doctor, not knowing if there will be food next week. That kind of poverty will crush your spirit and your health and your relationships. Money solves those problems. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never been truly poor. But here is what I learned in 47 years of sitting at the bedsides of the rich. There is a point, and it comes much sooner than you think, where more money stops helping and starts hurting. Not because money is evil, because what you sacrifice to get it is irreplaceable, and what you buy with it is worthless. Let me tell you about Eleanor Vandermeer. I cared for her from September of 1973 until she died in February of 1974. She lived in a 12,000 square FT house in Greenwich with 7 bedrooms, a pool, a tennis court, and a rose garden that employed 2 full-time gardeners. Her late husband had been a partner at one of the large Wall Street firms. She had more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. Eleanor was 78 years old, and she was dying of heart failure. She had 4 children. Not one of them visited in the 5 months I was with her. Not one. Her daughter in California sent flowers twice. That was it. Eleanor would sit in her sunroom overlooking that rose garden and cry. Not about dying, about the fact that she had raised 4 children and not one of them loved her enough to come say goodbye. I asked her once near the end what had happened. She told me that when her children were young, she and her husband were building their fortune. They worked constantly. They sent the children to boarding schools, summer camps, anywhere that would take them off their hands. They were providing for their children's futures. They thought they were securing their children's opportunities. You understand what she said to me? She said, "Vivian, I traded my children for money that they do not even want. I gave them everything except myself. And now I am dying, surrounded by beautiful things, and I am completely alone." I stayed with Eleanor until her last breath. Her children did not come to her funeral. This is not a rare story. This is the story I saw repeated over and over for nearly half a century. The details changed. The mansions were in different locations. The fortunes came from different sources, but the loneliness was identical. You need to hear this. You are probably watching this video because you are working too much. You are probably telling yourself that you are doing it for your family. You are probably thinking that once you reach some number, some goal, some level of security, then you will slow down. Then you will spend time with your children. Then you will call your mother more often. Then you will nurture your friendships. Then you will rest. I watched people die with this exact plan unfinished for 47 years. The money kept coming. The then never arrived. Let me tell you about another patient, Richard Harwood. I cared for him in 1982 in a penthouse on Park Avenue. 23 rooms, a view of Central Park that would stop your heart, a Picasso in the living room, an actual Picasso. Richard was a self-made man. He had started with nothing, built a manufacturing empire, and accumulated a fortune that most people cannot comprehend. He was proud of this, and he should have been. It is not easy to build something from nothing. He worked 18-hour days for 40 years. He missed his children's graduations, their weddings, their birthdays. He told me he thought he was doing the right thing. He was making sure they would never have to struggle like he did. Richard was dying of emphysema when I met him. He could not walk across the room without running out of breath. He spent most of his time in a hospital bed in that penthouse looking out at Central Park through oxygen tubes. One afternoon, I was adjusting his pillows and he grabbed my hand. His grip was weak but desperate. He looked at me and he said, "Vivian, I have spent my entire life accumulating things. I have more things than anyone could ever need. And right now, lying here, I would trade all of it, every dollar, every property, every painting for one more year with my wife." His wife had died 8 years earlier. They had been planning to travel together when he retired. He was always going to retire next year. Next year never came. She died of a stroke at 64, 6 months before his planned retirement. Richard died 3 weeks after that conversation. His children sold the penthouse and the Picasso. I do not think any of them kept anything of his. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly in your own mind, not out loud. How much of your life are you currently postponing? How many dinners have you missed with people you love? How many weekends have you spent working instead of living? How many times have you told someone, "I am sorry, I cannot. I have to work"? How many times have you thought to yourself, "Someday I will have time for this"? Someday is a lie you are telling yourself, so you do not have to face the trade you are actually making. The research on this, by the way, backs up everything I saw. Scientists have studied this for decades now. They have found that once you have enough money to cover your basic needs and some security, more money does not make you happier. A Princeton study found that happiness levels off around $75,000. More recent research has refined this, but the basic finding holds. After a certain point, more money does not buy more happiness. But we keep chasing it anyway. You know why? Because we can measure money. We can see it grow. We can compare it to others. It gives us something to aim at. Happiness is harder to measure. Relationships are harder to quantify. We do not get promotions for being good parents or gold stars for calling our mothers. So we optimize for what we can count, and we let the things we cannot count slip away. And then we wake up at 78 like Eleanor Vandermeer, surrounded by beautiful roses and nobody who loves us. I want to tell you about someone different now because I did not only care for unhappy rich people, I also cared for some who figured it out. Margaret Hennessy. I cared for her in 1989 in a modest colonial in Stamford, Connecticut. By the standards of my usual patients, Margaret was not wealthy. She had a comfortable house, enough money to afford my care, and not much more. Her husband had been a high school principal. She had been a teacher. Margaret was dying of cancer. She was in considerable pain most days. But here is what I remember about Margaret. Her house was full of people. Her 3 children came every week. Her grandchildren came after school. Former students came. Colleagues she had not seen in years came. The house was small and cluttered and always filled with voices. Margaret told me once that she and her husband had made a decision early in their marriage. They decided that they would never sacrifice time with their children for extra money. Her husband turned down a position as superintendent because it would have meant working evenings and weekends. Margaret turned down a promotion to department head for the same reason. They made less money than they could have. They lived in a smaller house than they could have afforded if they had both worked more. But they ate dinner together every night for 34 years. They went to every recital, every game, every school play. They knew their children's friends. They knew their children's fears. They were present. When Margaret died, her children were holding her hands, all 3 of them. They were crying and telling her they loved her and thanking her for the life she had given them. I have been present at many deaths. I can tell you that there is a difference between dying surrounded by people who love you and dying surrounded by people who are waiting for their inheritance. The difference is everything. You may be thinking to yourself right now that this is easy for me to say. I am not in the rat race anymore. I do not have a mortgage, children to feed, college tuition to save for. What do I know about the pressures you are facing? I know this. Every single person who sacrificed their relationships for money told themselves the same thing you are telling yourself right now. They all believed they had no choice. They all believed the pressure was unique to them. They all believed that they were doing the right thing for their families. They were wrong, and they only realized they were wrong when it was too late to change it. The people who figured it out, people like Margaret Hennessy, they had the same pressures. They had mortgages and children and bills. They were not privileged people who could afford to opt out. They just made different choices. They said no to some things so they could say yes to other things. They decided that their presence in their children's lives was more important than a bigger house or a fancier car. These were not easy choices. They involved trade-offs and sacrifices, but they were choices. You have choices too. You are just pretending you do not, because the choices are hard. I want to tell you something else I learned from 47 years at bedsides. Nobody in all those years ever told me they wished they had worked more. Not one person. Not the executives, not the lawyers, not the doctors, not the people who built empires and the people who inherited them. Not one single person said, "I wish I had spent more time at the office." But many of them wished they had worked less. Many of them wished they had been home more. Many of them wished they had put down the phone, closed the laptop, ignored the email. Many of them wished they had said yes to the fishing trip, the school play, the Sunday dinner. Many of them wished they had been present for the lives that were happening around them while they were busy accumulating money they would never spend. I have one more patient to tell you about. His name was James Whitfield. I cared for him in 1995. He was 91 years old and dying of kidney failure in a brownstone on the Upper West Side. He was worth more than $100 million. James was different from most of my patients. He was not bitter. He was not lonely. His children visited constantly. His grandchildren adored him. He had a contentment about him that I rarely saw in people with his kind of wealth. I asked him about it one night. I asked him how he had managed to be so wealthy without becoming miserable. He told me that when he was 42 years old, his best friend died of a heart attack. Dropped dead at 44. Worked himself to death, James said. That was 1946. After the funeral, James went home and did something radical. He calculated how much money he actually needed to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He added a cushion for emergencies. He arrived at a number, and then he stopped. He stopped working 60-hour weeks. He stopped chasing the next deal. He let younger partners take over. He started coming home for dinner. He started coaching his son's baseball team. He started traveling with his wife. He started living. His partners thought he was crazy. They said he was leaving money on the table. He told me that was the point. He said, "Vivian, I decided to leave money on the table so I could sit at the table with my family instead." James Whitfield lived for 49 more years after that decision. He had enough money for anything he wanted. But what he wanted, it turned out, was time, and he gave himself permission to take it. I am 101 years old. I do not know how much longer I have. Could be years, could be months, could be next week. At this point, you stop pretending you know. But I know this. I have lived long enough to see entire generations make the same mistake. I have watched people sacrifice their lives for money they never spend on happiness they never feel. I have watched families dissolve over inheritances that bring nothing but misery. I have watched people reach the end with full bank accounts and empty hearts. You do not have to join them. You can decide today that you have enough. You can decide that your presence is more valuable than your production. You can decide that dinner with your family is more important than another hour at the office. You can decide that calling your mother this week matters more than answering that email tonight. These are choices. They are hard choices, but they are yours to make. I am not telling you to quit your job or throw away your ambitions. I am telling you to be honest about what you are trading and what you are getting in return. I am telling you to stop pretending that someday will arrive on its own. I am telling you that the people you love will not be here forever, and neither will you. James Whitfield calculated his number at 42 and gave himself 50 years of life instead of 50 years of work. What is your number, and when are you going to stop? I have said what I needed to say. I am tired now. The young woman helping me with this recording says I should tell you to like and subscribe, but I do not really know what that means. I just hope you listened. Your life is not waiting for you somewhere in the future. It is happening right now. Go live it while you still